I didn't expect the word burden to sound so heavy. It slipped out of my mother's mouth casually, like she was commenting on the weather. She has a baby now, she said, stirring sugar into her tea. How long will she keep leaning on us? A child is a burden, after all. The room went quiet. My daughter, Leela, was asleep in my arms, 3 months old, warm, breathing softly against my chest like she trusted the world to be kind. I felt something crack inside me, not loudly, not all at once, just a slow, quiet fracture. My father nodded. We raised our kids already. We didn't sign up for round two. I looked around the dining table. Sunday lunch. The same wooden table where I'd done homework as a child, where birthdays were celebrated, where my parents once promised they'd always have my back. No one noticed my hands shaking. No one noticed my eyes burning, because I didn't cry. I smiled. That's what I'd always done. I was the easy child. Straight A's, scholarships, no teenage rebellion, no scandals. I moved out early, worked 2 jobs through college, never asked for help, even when I probably should have. When I got pregnant at 29, alone, with the baby's father disappearing the moment the test turned positive, I didn't run to my parents. I made a plan. I budgeted, I downsized, I worked remote nights while nauseous during the day. I saved every dollar. When Leela was born, I didn't ask them to babysit. I didn't ask for money. I didn't even ask for emotional support. I just showed up because I still believed family meant something. Apparently, I was wrong. They didn't know I'd been paying their bills. Not recently. For years. It started quietly. After my dad's back injury forced early retirement, their savings drained fast. Pride kept them silent, but I saw the overdue notices, the stress lines on my mother's face, the way she avoided opening mail. So I stepped in. Electric bill, paid. Water, paid. Then groceries. Then property taxes one year when they forgot. I set everything on autopay from my account, told myself it was temporary. It never was. I sent money under my sister's name so they wouldn't suspect. I handled it all silently, invisibly, because that's what the easy child does. "So what's your plan?" my father asked that day, leaning back in his chair. "You can't expect us to help forever." Help. The word felt like a slap. "I'm not asking for help," I said quietly. My mother sighed. "We're just being realistic. Babies cost money, time, energy. You should have thought of that." I looked down at Leela. Her tiny fingers curled around my thumb. I realized something terrifying. If I stayed silent, my daughter would grow up watching me accept disrespect as normal, and I refused to teach her that. That night, after I put Leela to sleep in her crib, I opened my laptop. I stared at the spreadsheet I'd kept for years. Every payment, every date, every bill. The total made my chest tighten, enough to change their lives. Enough that they never said thank you, because they never knew. I hovered over the cancel autopay button. My finger trembled. Then I clicked. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't feel angry. I felt free. The next week passed quietly. Then the calls started. First polite, then confused, then panicked. "Do you know why the electricity payment didn't go through?" my mother asked. "No," I said. And for the first time in my life, I didn't explain. That Sunday, they called me back to the same dining table, same teacups, same chairs. But this time, I didn't bring apologies. I brought the truth. And once it came out, Nothing would ever be the same again.
The morning sunlight fell across the dining room like it had done hundreds of times before, but today it felt different. I carried Leela in my arms, her tiny body warm and soft, and I could feel the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me. I set her in her high chair, carefully strapping her in, and turned toward my parents. "I have something to tell you," I said, voice calm but steady. My father raised an eyebrow. My mother pursed her lips. They had no idea. "Go on," my mother said, with a hint of impatience. I took a deep breath. I wanted to start small, ease into it. "I've been paying your bills for years," I said. Silence. The sugar spoon hovered mid-air in my mother's hand. My father blinked slowly, trying to process the words. "Excuse me?" my father finally said, leaning forward. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. The electricity, water, property taxes, groceries, all of it. I've been doing it quietly, under my name, through my accounts, so you wouldn't have to worry, so I wouldn't have to worry. I've been your silent supporter." They stared, and in that silence I felt the weight of every unspoken word, every ungrateful remark, every cruel comment about Leela. "You... what?" my mother whispered, voice shaking. Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at Leela, chewing on her little teething toy. I looked at the tiny human who was the most important part of my life, and then I looked back at my parents. "I didn't tell you because I didn't need recognition. I didn't do it to be praised. I did it because I love you, and I wanted to protect you, just like I want to protect Leela now." My mother's hand trembled as she set down her cup. I thought," she began, then stopped. "We never thought of it that way. We just said what we said." "You called my baby a burden," I said softly, watching the shock ripple across their faces. "And yet, for years, I've carried the weight you wouldn't, couldn't, or didn't carry. I was silent when you were cruel. I smiled when you mocked me, and you never knew." My father's face went pale. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. I could see it, realization dawning. "Do you understand what this means?" I asked. "I didn't just keep the house running. I was holding this family together, silently, while you dismissed my life, my choices, my child." My mother buried her face in her hands. My father's hand shook as he reached for his tea, but he didn't touch it. He couldn't. The room was heavy with all the words we hadn't said, all the resentment, all the misunderstanding, all the love that had been buried under expectations and judgment. I had no idea," my mother whispered finally, her voice barely audible. We thought you were struggling like any new mother. We thought we were helping by giving advice." "Advice?" I laughed bitterly, and it hurt more than I expected. "Advice that Leela is a burden? That I can't handle this? That I'm selfish for having a child? Is that what you call advice?" My father's hands gripped the edge of the table. We didn't mean it like that." "You didn't mean it like that?" I repeated, my voice breaking slightly. "You didn't mean to call my child a burden? Yet your words hurt more than any bill ever could." For the first time, the room was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Leela cooed in her high chair, oblivious to the tension, and I felt my heart tighten. This was the moment everything changed. I could feel it in my bones. My parents had underestimated me, underestimated what I was willing to carry, and underestimated my quiet strength. "I could have asked you for help," I said. "I didn't. I wanted to do this on my own, And while I was paying your bills, I was also building a life for Leela and me. And I did it without complaining, without crying to anyone, without ever asking for pity. Do you know why? They shook their heads slowly, still silent. Because being independent doesn't make you selfish. Being self-sufficient doesn't mean you stop caring. And being strong doesn't mean you need your parents to approve of every decision you make. I did it because I love you. And I'm still here. I'm still here, despite everything. My father's eyes glistened. My mother's face was wet with tears. They had never seen me like this. They had never realized the depth of my resolve. I was carrying your family, I continued, literally. While you criticized my child, I was quietly holding up the walls of your life. And now that I've revealed it, do you understand how heavy that word burden really is? Not for me, for Leela.
The rest of the morning passed in a heavy, awkward silence. My parents didn't speak. They didn't apologize, at least not yet, and I didn't push them. I spent that time watching Leela, the small, fragile life that had been dismissed as inconvenient, the little girl whose existence had forced me to finally confront the people I loved the most. And I realized something profound. Sometimes you have to carry the truth alone until the world is ready to hear it. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are also the ones you love the most, and you have to let them sit in their own discomfort before anything can heal. Later, I held Lila against my chest, feeling her tiny heart beat against mine. I will never let anyone call you a burden, I whispered. Not your father, not your mother, not even me if I ever feel overwhelmed. You are not a burden. You are life. You are love. You are worth more than words can ever express. And for the first time, I felt a sense of calm, a sense of resolve. My parents might have misjudged me, misjudged Lila, misjudged life, but I had found my own power. I had found my own voice, and nothing, not even the word burden, could take that away from me. The days after the revelation were tense. I returned to my routine, work, bills, feeding Lila, but the air around the house had changed. My parents no longer spoke casually. Their laughter felt forced, their smiles hollow. The truth had shifted the foundation of our family. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want anger. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted them to see the years of invisible labor I had done, not for praise, but for understanding. It happened on a Wednesday evening. I had Leela asleep in her crib, and my father was sitting in the living room, staring at an old photo album. I approached cautiously. "Dad," I said softly, "can we talk?" He didn't look up. "I know you've done a lot for us," he said quietly. His voice was heavy. I never realized." I swallowed, steadying my voice. "You never realized because you never asked, because you never listened, and because you believed your words wouldn't hurt." He finally looked at me, and I could see the shame etched into his face. For the first time, I felt a small shift. Something inside him was cracking, the same kind of crack I had felt when they called Leela a burden. I want to make it right," he said. "Tell me how." I shook my head. "This isn't about money. It's about respect, acknowledgement, and understanding. You can't erase the words you said, but you can start listening, and you can start seeing Leela and me as equals, not problems." My mother remained distant. She avoided eye contact, busying herself with chores she hadn't done in years. I realized then that guilt had silenced her more effectively than any argument ever could. One night, I confronted her in the kitchen. Leela was asleep in her room. The warm scent of dinner hung in the air. I could see the exhaustion in my mother's eyes. More than the years of raising children, more than the weight of her pride, it was the weight of regret. "Mom," I said gently. My mother remained distant. She avoided eye contact, busying herself with chores she hadn't done in years. I realized then that guilt had silenced her more effectively than any argument ever could. One night, I confronted her in the kitchen. Leela was asleep in her room. The warm scent of dinner hung in the air. I could see the exhaustion in my mother's eyes. More than the years of raising children, more than the weight of her pride, it was the weight of regret. "Mom," I said gently, "I need you to hear me." She turned, tears in her eyes. I didn't mean it. Leela's a beautiful child. I don't know what I was thinking." I took a deep breath. Words matter. Your words hurt. But you can change how you speak now. You can change how you support her and me. That's all I ask. She nodded slowly, and I could see the beginning of acknowledgement, a fragile yet powerful first step. Over the next few weeks, the household changed subtly. My parents tried, awkwardly at first, to offer help without criticism. My father would occasionally check in about errands, but with respect rather than expectation. My mother would make meals, but she stopped commenting on my parenting choices. They were learning. But Lila was the true catalyst. Her innocence forced them to see the world differently. The tiny fingers, the soft coos, the innocent laughter, it reminded them of the joy they had once felt with me as a baby. And slowly, they began to connect the dots, the sacrifices I had made, the work I had done silently, the patience and love I had shown. I realized then that truth is powerful, not only in confrontation, but in creating understanding. My parents hadn't changed overnight, but they were beginning to see. One morning, I watched my parents interact with Leela. They were making her breakfast. My mother hummed softly, and my father playfully spilled a bit of cereal. Leela giggled uncontrollably. The moment was small, ordinary, but to me, it was revolutionary. I remembered all the times I had stayed silent to keep the peace, all the times I had swallowed my pride to avoid conflict. I realized that silence had been my weapon and my shield. I had carried this burden alone, not to be heroic, but to protect myself and my child. Now, silence had become a teaching tool. They were beginning to learn through observation, through witnessing the devotion and strength I had carried without complaint. It wasn't smooth. There were still sharp words, old habits that surfaced. My mother would occasionally mutter, "I can't believe you did all that." My father sometimes said, "We should have known." But I stayed steady, patient, letting them adjust. Understanding doesn't come in a day. It comes slowly, in fragments, in moments of clarity. One evening, as I tucked Leela into bed, my father appeared in the doorway. I can't say it enough. I didn't realize what you've been doing. I'm sorry." I smiled gently, resting my hand on Leela's soft head. "That's enough, Dad. That's a start." And for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. Not complete peace, there were years of healing ahead, but a beginning. Through this, I learned something profound. Love isn't always understood. Sacrifice isn't always recognized. Family isn't always supportive, but it can be transformed.
And most importantly, I learned the value of standing firm, of parrying the truth without expectation, and of protecting those you love, even if the world calls them a burden. Because some burdens aren't weights, they're responsibilities, privileges, and acts of love that define who we are. I made a promise to myself that night to never let anyone belittle my child, to never let silent sacrifices go unnoticed by those I trust, to teach Leela the meaning of strength, compassion, and resilience. And slowly, my parents began to adjust. Not perfectly, not without resistance, but genuinely. They were learning that love isn't conditional, that support isn't transactional, and that words have the power to harm or heal. And for me, that was enough.
The change in our household was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but inevitable. My parents were beginning to respect boundaries, adjusting their words, learning to see Leela as the child she was, innocent, deserving, and loved, not as some inconvenience that disturbed their comfort. But it wasn't enough. The real reckoning would come when the rest of the family discovered the truth. It started innocently. My sister called one afternoon. "Mom and Dad want to host dinner this weekend," she said. "Everyone will be there. Aunt June, Uncle Bill, even cousins from out of state." My stomach clenched. I had no interest in turning this into a spectacle, but I agreed. Leela needed family. I needed closure. The week passed slowly. I prepared Leela's things, made her nursery spotless, and rehearsed what I would say if the conversation went off course. The truth had power, but in front of a room full of relatives, it could explode. The house smelled like roasted chicken and baked bread. My parents smiled nervously as I entered with Leela in her carrier. The cousins noticed her immediately, cooing, reaching to touch her tiny fingers. I smiled politely. I greeted everyone warmly. No one suspected anything. Yet. Dinner was served. Conversations started casually, with polite inquiries about work, weather, and school. My mother attempted small talk with Aunt June. My father talked sports with Uncle Bill. I sat quietly, observing, waiting. It was my uncle who accidentally started it. "So, I heard something interesting," he said casually, as if testing the waters. "Apparently, someone's been paying bills for the household without anyone knowing." Laughter followed. "Really?" my cousin chimed in. "Who's the mystery benefactor?" I sipped my water slowly. The air shifted. My parents froze mid-chew. "I think it's time people knew the truth," I said softly. "It's me." The room went silent. Forks hovered in mid-air. Lila cooed softly in my arms, oblivious to the tension. The revelation hit everyone like a thunderclap. "What?" my aunt exclaimed, dropping her napkin. "You've paid all their bills?" "Yes," I said, "for years. Every utility, grocery, and tax payment, under my accounts. No one knew. And no, I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I love this family, and because I wanted to protect my parents and my daughter." Murmurs rippled across the room. Eyes widened. Some relatives shook their heads, incredulous. Others whispered, "That's incredible." My mother's face turned pale. My father's jaw tightened. The weight of unspoken words finally pressed down on them. Then came the question I had been expecting. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" my cousin asked. "Why let them think they were right about your baby?" I looked at my daughter, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, and then back at the room full of adults who had assumed she was a burden. I didn't want anyone to question her worth. I didn't want anyone to treat her as an inconvenience.
and I didn't want anyone to dismiss my choices or my love for her. I handled it silently so Leela would never feel unloved, unimportant, or unwanted. The room was quiet, truly quiet, the kind of silence that makes every heart beat louder, every mind consider the depth of sacrifice and courage it takes to love unconditionally. It was my uncle who spoke next, gently. "You've carried a heavy load silently. None of us realized." "None of us deserved this," my aunt added. "You've given so much, your money, your time, your love, without ever asking for anything in return. That's remarkable." My parents were visibly shaken. They didn't need words. Their shame was palpable. They had judged a baby, dismissed a daughter, and underestimated the quiet strength that had sustained the household for years. I realized then that acknowledgement doesn't need applause. It doesn't require dramatic gestures. Sometimes quiet recognition, the soft, humbled murmurs of those who have underestimated you, is enough. Over dinner, conversations shifted. Relatives began asking questions about Leela, genuinely curious about her routines, her milestones, and her personality. My parents answered humbly, avoiding overstatements. I noticed something profound. Respect had begun to replace judgment. Every question, every smile, every soft laugh acknowledged that Leela wasn't a burden. She was a blessing, and her presence commanded appreciation, not criticism. And for me, this was the victory. I had transformed their perception, not through anger or confrontation alone, but through transparency, courage, and unwavering love. After dinner, everyone moved to the living room. Leela was wrapped in a blanket, dozing in my arms. My parents sat quietly beside me, still processing. Finally, my mother spoke, tears glistening in her eyes. I didn't realize how wrong we were," she said. "I called her a burden without thinking, and I never acknowledged what you've done. I am so sorry." My father nodded. "We were blind. We judged without seeing. We criticized without understanding. You've carried this family on your shoulders, and we didn't even see it. I'm ashamed, and I want to do better." It was the apology I had longed for, not loud, not dramatic, but heartfelt. I held Leela close, feeling her heartbeat sync with mine. I looked at my parents and relatives and spoke softly but firmly. "I don't want anyone to live in guilt. I want us to move forward, together. Leela deserves to grow in a family that supports her, celebrates her, and protects her. And I want you to understand the weight words carry. Call her a blessing, not a burden. Honor her presence. That's all I ask." And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of calm, powerful and transformative. The room was quiet, the air was heavy with understanding, and for the first time I realized that love, honesty, and courage could break cycles of judgment, silence, and misunderstanding. That night, I tucked Leela into her crib. My parents lingered outside her door, watching silently, learning how to be present without judgment. The rest of the family had left, but the lesson remained. I understood now that some burdens, perceived burdens, are actually responsibilities that shape strength, courage, and character. I had carried mine quietly, but now the world knew, and nothing could diminish the love that had fueled every action. I realized that acknowledgement, though delayed, could transform relationships, and I was ready for whatever came next, the final chapter of understanding, healing, and unconditional love.